I thought that I'd offer a little video that perhaps pulls back the veil and gives you some insight into what it is a professor's looking for when they're asking you to do an assignment. You know, there is a kind of game to being a college student that if you know the rules, it's kind of straightforward and sort of easy. But if you don't know the rules, you're kind of shooting in the dark and you're not sure what's expected of you. So when you see an assignment and you read it, you're not quite sure, well, what is that really saying? So I thought I'd give a couple of tips that I think would help you with that. First of all, and one of the most important, is that you actually take the time to read the directions carefully and do what the directions say. And that might sound obvious, but a professor has usually spent a lot of time thinking about what it is they want you to do and crafting the assignment or the question in such a way that you're going to maximize what you're going to get out of it. If you don't do or don't read it carefully, you're not going to get out of it, and the professor is going to be, oh, well, you're not playing the game of being a college student right. So if you want to win at the game of being a college student, what I would suggest is read the question carefully and then visualize to yourself, well, what would it look like to do what this professor is asking me to do? Kind of make a mental image of what the final product looks like. What is the professor actually asking? And that's going to help you a lot to set the agenda and make sure that you're actually thinking through what it is that you want to do for the assignment. A second, and possibly the most important to understand clearly how it works, demonstrate in your answer. And when I say demonstrate, I mean give evidence that you've read the material. I can't emphasize this enough. This is like the old joke, show me the money, right? What a professor wants to see when they've assigned something is the evidence that you've, in a sense, digested the material. You haven't just read it, but you've thought about it, you've reflected on it, and that your mind has been formed as a result of the work that you've done. So how do you show that? You know, it's one thing to say, okay, I want evidence, but how do you give evidence? What does that look like? So let me tell you two things that it doesn't look like. One, it is not cutting and pasting a quote from a reading or from a website. Just throwing in some quotes that is vaguely about the topic isn't what a professor is looking for. Here's the trick. Adding a quote is actually more work than just simply stating it yourself. Because when you add a quote, you want to do two things. First, you want to make sure that the quote is actually saying it's saying something that's relevant to what you think what the question is, or what you think the purpose of the assignment is. A lot of times people just add a quote that has nothing to do with anything. It's a quote from the assignment, but it doesn't in any way contribute to the thought on the assignment. So it's not just adding a quote, it's adding a good quote. That's step one. And step two is explaining the quote, explaining what the quote is saying, restating what the quote is saying, and then connecting it to your larger point that's connected to the assignment. So adding a quote might be something that you do occasionally, but it's actually more work. So you don't want to do it often, and you want to, if you do it, you want to make sure that you don't just cut and paste. So when I say give evidence you've read the material, just cutting and pasting a quote is not that. In fact, oftentimes it gives the opposite effect. It might not be about what you're thinking it's about, and there's no explanation. So your professor is actually thinking, this person is trying to do the opposite of what I'm asking them to do. Because what I'm asking them to do is read and wrestle with the material, and then give evidence that they've read it and wrestled with the material. Adding a quote does not do that. Secondly, another thing that students do a lot is they'll reference the reading without explaining it. So they might say, let's call the reading such and such, because I can't think of one off the top of my head. So such and such reading says a lot about liberal studies. I learned a lot about liberal studies by reading such and such text. Okay? You've told me that you've read the text, and you've told me that it's about liberal studies, but anyone who's taking this class would have known that. You didn't have to read the text to know that. So what do you do? So those are the things not to do. What do you need to do to demonstrate it? One, you summarize what the main point of the text is about. You give an overall summary that says, this is what the text is saying. This is why it's important. This is the main point of the text. You restate in your own words what key terms, key ideas, the emphasis of the material. You restate it in your own words what it is. If it has a particularly important idea, I'm making one up, like transference or something, then you would explain the idea of transference, but you would do it in your own words. You wouldn't just quote it. You would attempt to rephrase it. You know, what is the main point of this? What is the idea here? What is the concept here? So by using your own terms and rephrasing and restating things, by summarizing the main point of the article and then explaining how the article is relevant to the question at hand, that's how you demonstrate. That's how you give the evidence that you've read the material. So that's really important. I hope that helps. A couple other things I'll just say very briefly. One is that recognize in an L class, a literacy class, writing and grammar matters even in your discussion posts. So even when you're replying to someone in your discussion posts, you should write it as well as you can. And I'll add this. This is a really great trick that I've learned. Read your writing out loud. If you actually read your writing like you're trying to communicate it, like for example, when I filmed my video at the beginning of this module or at the beginning of this course, I had the text actually up on a screen. It was a blue screen somewhere. And as I read it out loud, I realized how bad it was. And I had to say, stop, stop. And I took it down and I rewrote it and I read it out loud. And then I said, okay, this is what I want to read. Because the reason this works is that your ear hears mistakes better than your eye sees mistakes. You're used to hearing language. You're not as used to reading it. And so you'll hear the mistakes before you'll see them. So read out loud your text before you turn them in. I guarantee you'll catch mistakes right and left, and it'll save you many trips to the writing center. Another thing I would say is don't tell me what you think I want to hear. What I actually want to hear are two things: reality, what you actually were thinking and reflecting on as you were reading this material. I don't like to hear canned, this was a great assignment, because, and no professor wants to hear that. What they want to hear is how you actually engaged it. That's what they're interested in. They're not interested in what you think I want to hear. I don't need a pat on the back. What I want is to hear and to see the evidence that you've engaged with the assignment. And there might be things that you just didn't get, or that you didn't like, or it didn't work. For perhaps it was an assignment, a task of some sort. And it's fair game to say, I don't think that this part of the assignment really worked as well. I think what you were trying to get at is this, and it didn't really do that because of this. Wow, a professor is really impressed when they hear that, because that's actual engagement with the material or with the assignment. And that's what they want ultimately. They don't want you to just say, I really like this assignment, it was great because, unless that was the case. And then you want to say why it was great. You don't want to just say it was great. You want to say the reason why it was great is because it allowed me to do these three things, or I really learned in depth these three things. Always try, when you're responding to a peer's post, to critically analyze it. Don't just say, oh, that was great. I really liked when you said blank, when you were really thinking, this person kind of missed the main point, or why didn't this person talk about this, or yeah, that was a pretty good point. The point being, actually engage their writing in your response. Actually say, you know, that was really great when you said this, but I noticed that you didn't mention anything about this, and as I read the text, I thought it was really emphasizing this. Wow. Guess what? The person who reads it might actually benefit from your response, and you benefited from it as well. So that's called critically engaging. Critical doesn't mean being critical, like the way we have a connotation of, you know, being negative. What it means is actually wrestling with, in the same way that I'm asking you to do in all your assignments. So when you read an assignment, when you read someone else's post, critically engage it. Actually think, well, what did I think this person did well? What did I think this person missed? And what do I think this person just maybe didn't understand? And maybe you attempt to show them that, or you're having a dialogue with them about it. At the point. Finally, I'll say this: how to win at the college game. You give it what used to be called, what my parents' generation would call the old college try. And what that basically means is you actually show some effort. You actually wrestle with something. I remember one time, in fact, I was reading a book for my dissertation, and it was by a Nobel Prize laureate. He is a Nobel Prize winner in physics. And he was an impressive guy, but there was a section, and it was an important book for my dissertation, and so I had to get it. And I was going through it, and I just did not get it. I tried, I read it, I reread it, I reread it, I reread it, and I finally decided I'm going to email this guy and ask him if he'll explain what's going on here. But I knew if I just said, oh, I didn't get what's going on in these couple of pages, that's not going to help. That's not going to impress him. So what I did was I gave it the old college try. I gave 2 sample interpretations of what I thought it could have meant. You know, it could be saying this, but then it's unclear because of this. Or maybe it's saying this, but then it's unclear because of this. Can you please help me understand what's going on in this section? It's important for my dissertation. Guess what? This guy wrote me, it was probably an 8-page email in response. And the beauty of his response was he appreciated so much the wrestling, and his first thing was, what you caught was something that bothered me that my editor did to this chapter. And I did not like it. I fought him on it, but it was my editor, and he just felt like the real answer was too complicated, and so they cut it. And I'm agreeing with you, and here's what's really going on in that chapter. I was like, oh my God. First of all, he respected what I'm calling the old college try, right? And so that's what I want you to do. Or, you know, you don't have to go to the extremes that I'm describing right now unless it's that important to you. But the point is, you should show some effort. And if you show effort, like this Nobel Prize winner, it's going to motivate you. It's going to motivate your professor, me in this case, to respond. I'm going to give you my 2 cents too. I'm going to rise to the occasion if I see you rising to the occasion. If I see you being lazy, I'm going to be lazy, right? It's kind of a tit for tat thing. So give it the old college try and see what happens. And I hope these help. I hope these give you some insight into what a professor is looking for. So thank you for taking the time to look at this. Good luck.